Okay, we are here for the Willamette Week endorsement interview for Oregon House District 43, where I happen to live. And we have Representative Tana Sanchez and Tim LeMaster.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming in. I think we saw you both a couple years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. Ground rules, I'm going to ask you each to give about a 2-minute introduction, who you are, what your record is, what you stand for, and then we'll have a discussion. We try to make it, basically equal, but it might not be perfectly equal. We encourage you not to interrupt each other, too much, and we'll just see how it goes. It's pretty freewheeling. Okay, so Representative Sanchez, why don't we start with you?
Okay, Tana Sanchez, currently State Representative, House District 43, North and Northeast Portland. I am Shoshone, Bannock, and Ute. In my real-life job that pays the bills, I'm the Director of Family Services at NAIA Family Center. Been there for 27, almost 28 years. I have a master's degree in social work. I've been in the legislature since 2017, was elected in 2016. I'm currently the co-chair of Ways and Means. I started out in Human Services and Housing and Judiciary and Public Safety Subcommittee. Done a lot of different things in the legislature, primarily focused on human services and of course working with folks around criminal justice and those types of things, trying to make sure we have behavioral health issues taken care of, lots of different things of that nature. And right now, just making sure we have a good distribution of resources to assure that the state has things taken care of in a lot of different ways. And obviously, the work that I do in my real life job is very connected in those ways. So, on the ground makes a difference in how you think about the way things move.
Great. Tim?
Tim LeMaster, retired out of the Marine Corps a few years ago. Combat camera officer, was enlisted, worked my way up to major.
Did you say camera officer?
Yes, I was a photographer, video, went to school at Syracuse for journalism. And
Newhouse?
Yes. So Newhouse alumni with that.
Where did you grow up?
Colorado. Basically, mom was divorced, ping-ponged between North Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas.
And you're in the Marines for how many years?
21 and a half.
Where did you serve overseas?
That's almost where I didn't serve. Got 2 6-month tours on ship in the Mediterranean, did miscellaneous stuff through that in my early days. Freaking Central America, Honduras, Okinawa, mainland Japan, California. I was a single guy the whole time, so I was the easy one. They just kept shooting me all over the place. Iraq, did a stint there. Towards the tail end of it, actually, was we shut down Fallujah while I was there. It was
And
a
so,
peaceful time.
there's Stars and Stripes, which is a paper for the
I
Army.
know who they are.
No, I'm
Yeah.
not I'm testing me.
Sure.
Were you working for the Marine newspaper?
No, so things have changed since I got out, but we had photographers, we call it more or less the audio-visual side. We ended up combining with print, reproduction work, video, and photo. We were separate from public affairs, where public affairs would use our stuff, and if you check the military, the DVIDs is what it's called, you'll see some of my stuff from things I've shot back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But we were more in the way of technical service provision. We do training videos, we had guys out in the middle of Iraq
Gotcha.
doing training videos for driving trucks because
Gotcha.
trucks were having problems in the sand, and
Gotcha.
and information operations and so on.
So you were honorably discharged at some point.
Yep.
And then what have you been doing since?
A lot of travel, retired, came out here, finished up my degree.
Oh, so you moved to Oregon when?
It was 11 years ago.
Okay.
So came to Oregon, passed through, and just really liked it. I knew people from the area that I'd met in my travels, and I was in Hawaii and knew folks and came through and really enjoyed the irreverent way that Portland is, and enjoyed a lot. Worked on my degree, got a cat, and that kind of cemented me sticking around. Got a house 9 years ago there in Northeast and such, and rent rooms in the house to people, travel.
So you don't have a job.
Nothing
got
particular.
your
Help people
Marine
out.
pension, you've got a house.
Yeah,
in
I was smart, saving my money.
Okay.
It's amazing how many people don't do that.
And why are you running?
Well, one, I saw that 2 years ago was my first run, and we had all the violence going on, all the problems, lack of safety, the police, And then when I found out that nobody's even run in the seat at that point more than, I think, 20 years before anybody had challenged the Democrat side on this. And I think that's a travesty. I mean, even if nothing else, people should at least feel like they have an option.
What's the registration breakdown in your district?
It's pretty much like 10 to 1. I mean, it's like the Republicans, I mean, the Republican side is like negligible, honestly.
So are you running as a protest vote? Do you think you have a chance of winning? You just sort of like going out and talking to reporters?
So it's been great meeting people and to engage, the process. Last time around, my eyes opened up to a lot how disappointing it is, really. I mean, it's all, by and large, it's just a financial exchange, really. I mean,
do you have any civic engagement since you've been in Portland that you want to share with us?
I mean, as far as
school board, PTA?
No.
Okay.
Just living my life in
And
that
is there
respect.
a particular issue you're most focused on if you were elected?
Well, education certainly to me is a huge one. I mean, we got, again, and continuing some of the worst schools in the country. I mean, year after year, it's been coming up like that.
So what would you do about that?
Well, I think the school choice is certainly a tremendous option.
Expand school choice.
Sure. School choice, I mean, that being a huge one right there, I think that would open up a lot on its own right.
Are you supporting the candidate who's running for president in your party?
Compared to the contrast, yes.
Okay.
So you're supporting Donald Trump?
That's probably where my vote's going to go.
Okay, thanks.
Did you want to add anything else to your bio or your statement?
Yeah, so something I want to say is, so when I came here 2 years ago, I thought it was an amazing discussion. And we talked about the record homicide, we talked about the homeless issues, the Measure 114 issues, just all the things that had been going on. It was an amazing, engaging discussion here in the room. And even, I don't know if it was you, but one of the gentlemen on the way out shook his hand. And there's a lot of cynicism on the conservative side. There's a lot of cynicism about coming in and talking to local media. And that cynicism, in my view, is validated. Because when I see the endorsement that came out,
The endorsement, not of you mean? In the
correct, and I wasn't worried about getting an endorsement.
Right.
But when the stuff we talked about here and my campaign got written off as Tim LeMaster's Marine frustrated with tents and trash, that's what you guys wrote. And so I printed out, the whole dialogue from YouTube, because it does that, and not once was tents or trash ever mentioned.
So you think we unfairly represented your views?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll try to do a better job this time. And then you can let us know next time.
Sure.
Okay?
I mean, that was, all the people I talked to, record homicide at the time. And it can't even be just, hey, we've got some issues. Let's challenge the status quo.
Okay?
So, yeah, that's, part of my motivation for getting into it this time is to, face you guys and bring that up. Things
right.
could be better
Well, you've
if things
achieved
were more
that.
squarely placed. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So,
Tana, can I ask you about behavioral health, which you made clear is a very special interest of yours. It's pretty hard to look at the outcomes in this state and not say that we're failing in that area. And it also doesn't appear to be, at least according to people in the profession that we talk to, because of a lack of resources. Maybe misdirected resources, but not for a lack of overall resources. We had the head of psychiatry at OHSU who said we have the worst access to behavioral health care in the country, and our cost per access is twice what it is, for example, in Massachusetts, which has great access. So can you provide some insight into what's going on wrong here?
I think there's a lot of things that are going wrong. I think, access is a thing that if you think about it, like who's doing the work, right? How many bodies do we actually have in the room? Where are people getting access? Is it folks who are on the Medicaid rolls? Is it folks who's actually providing the services? We know we don't have enough bodies actually in the room providing those services. We're doing better now than we were before. And I will tell you that years ago, I sat in actually in the Portland City Council chambers, and was having a conversation with a whole bunch of people who were like, really, as soon as the ACA gets going, we'll have a lot of access. People will have mental health access. And I'm like, you have got to be out of your mind. That's not going to happen because we don't have enough service providers. And we didn't then and we don't now because we disinvested in those bodies.
That's a national dilemma.
It is a national dilemma.
And yet we still underperform the rest of the country.
Right.
So there's got to be something else. And so let me posit something and you can agree or disagree. Again, refer to George Keepers, head of psychiatry at OHSU. He says the problem, and it's been validated by conversations we've had with others, that the state set up to give every county the responsibility and throw money at them has been a complete and utter failure. And in fact, we talked to someone in Kate Brown's office who acknowledged that, and he said the problem is we don't get along with the counties enough to come to any kind of terms, and the counties aren't going to give up that power. But that fundamentally the system that was set up to let every county decide on its own how to spend its money has become an utter failure. Your thoughts?
That's probably very close.
And if that's true, who's benefiting from the status quo?
I don't think it's just that. I think there's a lot of different things that are part of the problem. And it's not just the way the county distributes resources. I think that systemically we have overall issues about how we get bodies in the room, how we distribute resources, how we educate people, how we make it really, really difficult for people to get educated, to get through the process, how we get the right bodies in the room to be able to do that work, how we allow them to be licensed and certified to be able to do that work. That's a problem as well.
So the problem is that it's too hard to license people, that there's no reciprocity with other states?
That's a little bit of a problem too.
What's standing in the way of that change?
That's another question. There is a whole system.
But we're looking to you for the answers. You know,
I don't
you're
have
a
them
very
all.
highly rated legislator. You're on the joint committee. You're acknowledging that these are the problems. Why?
It's a constant battle that we're working on every single day to have those conversations. And excuse me, sir.
We'll give you a chance, Tim.
And we are having those conversations. I've actually, moved some legislation to continue to try to have those, conversations and push the boards to continue to have the
Okay, you
conversations.
could wave your wand. What would you do?
If I could wave my wand.
Would you tell the counties, give me back all the money in the state, and OHA is going to run behavioral health?
Oh, I would not do that, no.
Because?
No, because I think that if I could wave my wand,
Yeah.
I would make it so that behavioral health education would actually be almost free for people to go through that process. So that the boards would actually move people through in a much more cohesive fashion. That it would actually be much easier, that even these testing processes for people would be so much easier, and that people, because what I know is that the systems were designed not by people of color, actually. They're designed by a standard process, and then it's hard for people of color to get through those processes. So people,
When you're saying get through the process, you mean
the process
of becoming admitted to get help?
no,
Or to be a therapist?
to be a therapist.
Oh.
That process. So.
But I thought
so
part
it's-
of it is that it's not easy to be a licensed therapist in
It is.
Colorado and come here.
Well, there's that part too.
So
That's,
who benefits from this inability to create reciprocity?
I'm not sure who benefits. I know what's really hard sometimes is for people to give up their control. That's a power and control issue
So
that
you're
we
saying
all
this is
have.
the state board?
It's possible. It's possible, but people don't want to let go of that control because it's scary. People have a hard time giving up control of a process. If they built it and designed it, they have a really, really hard time of letting go of it.
Let's let Tim answer.
So like to me, this is all part of why I ran the first time, and why I'm here again. Okay, Tana Sanchez. I mean, you've been in office now for 8 years, and I brought this up last time. I mean, so much of this sounds like it's going to be the same thing as 2 years ago. Okay, the Democrat side has owned the state legislature and the governor's office for a generation, and lopsided big time. Supermajority for periods of that, and honestly a potential supermajority getting ready to go into it again. So how is it this supermajority hasn't taken care of the problems, and nobody's doing anything to change out either the supermajority or the people that are part of the supermajority. To me, one of the things when I look at media, and part of it's from just my background and stuff, I mean, I would hope that media and stuff, your editorials and such, why aren't Democrats being primaried for not providing results?
Okay, so then,
And so on it, who's benefiting? Follow the money. I never heard the term industrial homeless complex till I showed up here in Oregon. I didn't know that was a thing. And I hear it and okay. And you start watching it, it's like, who benefits? I mean, there's a whole status quo. And like you said, there's not a money issue. And even within the county, I just heard about and I looked into it. Gresham took care of a homeless issue a few years back and talked with, I know he's a contentious figure, was saying Kevin Dahlgren was running that system, and they had a good impact. And I said this last time I was here. There are places that you can just look at what are they doing. We got the Bybee Lakes facility.
Kevin Dahlgren's been charged criminally, right?
Right,
With
and
fraud
that's what I'm
and
saying,
identity
like,
theft.
right,
Yeah.
right. And, so whatever's going on with that, but there's no denying that in Gresham, they got a handle. And certainly it's a smaller scale, but when you talk systems and processes, so much of this stuff that's how you kind of build the stuff. What works on a small and what are the fundamentals there and scale it up. And you got Bybee Lakes facility, and it seems like every 6 months to a year something comes up about the contentiousness and the money in this fight to fund a successful program. And I know talking to them, it's the strings that get attached to it and such. So the answers are around, and again, a one-sided, one-party rule from state to city level, who's accountable? Nobody gets held accountable.
So what would you do differently than?
Number one in my mind is look at the places that work and just change and go with those methods. Talk to the Bybee Lakes people. Talk to them about loosening up the money and the restrictions to get put on it. One of the things I understand here is there's not one person, let's say at county level or city level, that's the person that is the primary responsible to coordinate and deal with outreach and getting all of this taken care of. And if there is a person, well, obviously they're not effective, because here's where we are. And you get the same people running this stuff in the chains of command, and if again, the accountability up at the state level, well, if the agencies that monitor and do that, it's not happening. So things have got to change, and that's part of where getting people from outside the system. I mean, Marine Corps, I don't have experience dealing with homelessness, but I got experience in, okay, we need to figure out, and one of the best ways is what's working in places. And you look at that and line that up. I mean, it's not a rocket science thing, per se.
John, are there any priorities you have going into next session? Or are you aware of what are going to be the big issues in the next session?
Well, obviously, the big issues will be school funding, because every 2 years it's school funding,
Mhm.
right? There will be the transportation package. There will be, the fire issues. We are, of course, in that big moment in fire issues.
What is going to be in front of the legislature related to fire?
There will be, of course, paying for it now, because we're in one of the worst fire seasons that we've had ever.
You mean paying for the prevention, paying for the cleanup, or paying for the lawsuits that have been filed against Pacificor?
Not the lawsuits. I don't know anything about that one right this very second. I don't have anything on my
Radar.
mind right this very second, but it will be paying for the current cleanup right this very second, and coming up with the plans for figuring out how do we deal with that in the future, because it will be an ongoing thing every single year going forward. How do we continue to deal with the ongoing issue as we get drier and drier throughout the states? I mean, this is not going to go away. California is still going to be in worse shape. We're going to get drier, and it will be an ongoing issue. So,
Can we just jump back to the behavioral health thing? Can you point to some things you've done to try that have accomplished improvement and change?
sure. We've continued to put resources towards behavioral health. Obviously, we've moved a lot of money in this last session. We moved we changed things around 4002. We actually put a lot of resources into addiction services and things of that nature. We did a lot of housing resources that, did supportive housing, that type of thing. I mean, things take time, and while I understand that, people want things to happen instantaneously, it doesn't work like that. I mean, and I would think that, you would understand that from the standpoint of being in the Marines. Structures that have existed for many, many years don't change overnight. They just don't. And when there are chains of command, you're responsible to a chain of command, and you have to participate in that, and you move forward as you're supposed to in those chains of command. You don't get to just change whatever you want to instantaneously, no matter how long you've been in the process. You have a level of power that you have, and you move forward with those things as best you can, and you try to make change as you move forward. Now, I've tried to make a lot of change, and I feel like I have. I've actually moved a lot of resources in the really amazing directions. As a matter of fact, I moved 988 legislation where now your cell phones are taxed 40 cents a month, right? So that there is the 988, phone
Yeah, although
call.
you could have easily come up with that money from the general fund and not raise people's taxes. There
Actually-
was money in the general fund to do that.
There was not.
Yes, there was. All you had to do is not give Intel the $6 million on top of the 50 that they already asked for. At the end of the session, you had already given Intel all the money they asked for, and then you said, we have extra money, so let's give Intel even more than they asked for, and then you passed your cell phone tax. Not denying the need for the service that that tax is paying for, but that money could have come out of not creating a new tax. I mean, it goes back to Tim's question. It's unfair to ask you to carry the burden of the Democratic Party, but there are a lot of indexes in which this state is far worse off than it was 20 years ago, right? I mean, if you want, I can share with you the data points, but you're well aware of that. And it's true, your party has been in complete charge. So it's not an illegitimate question to ask why there hasn't been more structural change. And if it is at all, possibly it's because there is one party in charge with a supermajority.
Well, I honestly feel like we couldn't have not have done it a whole lot differently. And there are a lot of other puts and takes to that. And it was necessary, in my opinion, to actually deal with that tax at that point in time. And I would have liked it to be different. I would have liked much more parity, because then we would have been able to put more resources into behavioral health services. At this point in time, we have a deficit, in my opinion, in behavioral health services. There are not the resources that we need in behavioral health services,
Again,
specifically for youth.
According to
who
the
are
head of
struggling.
psychiatry at OHSU, our cost is twice the average of every other state in the country. and
Because we
the
have
worst
not
access.
invested in the way that we should have in the beginning. We disinvested
So-
in services for behavioral health, and we
Point to a
caused
state.
ourselves a
Point to a
problem.
state that's doing it right. You know, Tim's saying, look at best practices. Point to a state that's doing it right that we could look to.
I don't have that off the top of my head right this very second.
Tim, where are you on? Are you pro-choice, pro-life?
I put myself in the moderate aspect of it. I think it's ludicrous to ban it. I believe the extremes on both sides are a bit much, but I also know and recognize that this is where we are in Oregon with it being the most liberal with it. And to me, as far as if fate reached down and bing, Tim, now you're in there. The abortion thing to me is the least of the concerns to deal with in Oregon. Honestly, honestly, I'm actually not, the Republican Party side here, and I've got many friends that are very staunch hardliners, and it's be interesting to watch, see how they react with, Trump coming out being more moderate on it per se. But yeah, to me, that's a divisive one. We're in a spot, to me, there's like the triage. We got bigger things to deal with before we go into these lightning rod, binary, proclaimed binary. That's the whole thing about it. The reality is most people are in the middle range of it. There's only a portion that are on the far end of late term abortion, and there's that portion that are absolute ban of abortion. Most people are in that reasonable window of secondish trimester. One of the things in the world of politics and the discussion, it's just frustrating as hell that the nuances don't get brought out like that. I've talked to liberal women. I'm surrounded. I'm in 90%. Most of my friends, especially the women, are very adamant. And I've talked with women. They were shocked when we found out Oregon does have third trimester options. Even my mom could have aborted me when she was young. She had me when she was 16. I even asked her, made for an awkward conversation, why didn't she? Yeah, why not? That's a reasonable thing to ask. What's your place? That was an option. She just felt she didn't, that wasn't her thing. She had friends saying you should. But in all reality, even she was aghast when I was like, yeah, they have late term. It's a legitimate thing here. So that's my thoughts on the abortion. It's funny because even on the Republican side, I get people all worked up at me over that one. But again, if by some stroke I got into office, that's honestly the least of what I think is concern. And it's just, it's set here. And the big thing on it, to me, this is where the Republican Party needs to get beat up on legitimately. You got to do the hearts and minds and build that mass on the social, cultural side. This is where we want to be. And the whole, Trump Supreme Court situation, that's the way our republic's supposed to work. One of the things that I've learned and grown on the last 2 years, I've read the Federalist paper. I actually started reading this Oregon Constitution, and it blows my mind when I see things going on now that it's already covered. Like Tana is a chief sponsor of the, the book bans by a gay lesbian author bill that was being pushed.
My guess is she wasn't in support of book bans.
Right. That's what I mean. To ban people from banning books, against it. Right. Sure. That's already in the Constitution. We have a constitutional amendment. The no law shall be passed. Let me see, was it that one? No, we've got it in our own state constitution.
But there are school districts that are banning books.
Sure, but you look at what are they banning, and you see obscenities. There's obscenity laws here, and there's stuff that fits that. And it's have the discussion on that. And books are not being banned because of who the authors are. They're being banned, I'll show you, because people are upset, and she's got a history of wedging herself and the Democrats here between parents and their kids. And where is it? This stuff is in our school books. Let's see what I did.
Why don't we move on?
While he's looking for that.
Well, here it is. This may look familiar because I know the people that helped pass this out and shut down that bill. And it's not about, that's what we're talking. There's people with strap-ons. And granted, that particular one hasn't necessarily shown up here, but these are the things that people are seeing. The book Flamer.
Seriously?
This one right here. Let me read it out. Kids sitting there in the shadows. We're each busting a load into this bottle. If you don't come, you have to drink it. Ha 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 ha. And this is in the schools. I know there's one about penguins, gay parent penguins people. The people upset about that, shut up. There's a thing there. But we're talking obscenity, and we have laws about that. And even with this, I think people need to take a step back, and I put myself in this too. Get worked up, what are we really talking about here? If we can't agree that is considered obscenity, I would get arrested if I was passing that out. And I think that's legitimate.
So that's another issue that
Sure.
would avoid, right? So are you saying that Representative Sanchez shouldn't have spent time on that?
Yeah, because again, we got other stuff, and if you take a breather, and honestly, if people would listen to the other side, and I know people on the Republican side, okay, and sometimes it's hard to get through them. Okay, you're on very upset and hysterical. Let's dial this down. I have to peel them back. What are we really talking about here? And if we had that going, that was so much energy by the.
Oopsie,
Sorry,
hang on.
that happens.
We have to just move around. Sorry.
So much energy by the legislature wasted, and not to mention the acrimony that it builds up in the public with these issues.
Do you want to defend? Do you want to talk about your position on this?
I think that effort was going to extremes, certainly, to find the absolute worst book we could find to say, this book must be banned. Because I don't know that was sitting in a school library. I doubt very seriously.
I got the printouts of some of them on the library system right here.
Was that book sitting in a library system?
The Flamer one right there. I said I brought it because
This one. Which one's that? This one?
the one right there, and then
Okay, don't know
what was it?
anything
There
about
was
that being in a
right,
in a
and that's what I'm
library
saying. If
system.
people would listen to what people are saying, and I agree that the right wing can get kind of hysterical and okay, let's take a breather and let's lay this out.
I'd really like to be able to know where
Yeah.
in the world that was actually sitting in a library. Which public school library was
Beaverton
that
School
actually
District.
in? Okay.
Which one is this? So there's Flamer. Beaverton School District Library.
Is that a book that you'd have problems with if it were in a public library?
Well,
Based on
again,
what you've seen?
based on what I've seen, I might have, yes, indeed.
Can
But-
I change the question, Anthony, you done with this?
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your capacity working with NIA. Lucas and I were looking at a website that was produced recently by the state about rural health and the challenges of rural health, which I would assume you're pretty familiar with. Warm Springs pops up a lot as the worst in the state in a variety of areas. I can't remember whether they were dealt with it. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on why that's the case.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear as to why we would relate that to NIA.
It's related to Native Americans.
Oh, just-
Why is the reservation at Warm Springs, why do
Probably
those
because-
residents have such bad performance in rural health compared to the rest of the state in a lot of specific categories?
Because it's probably because of, well, Indian health services are always very difficult. They're always significantly underfunded. And,
So the hospital that serves Warm Springs, which is a federal hospital, right?
right, that tends
Is
to
it
be.
a lousy hospital?
It tends to be significantly underfunded. It's also, rural areas, in particular, of course, reservation areas are very difficult to, most rural areas struggle with getting fresh foods, fresh vegetables, those types of things. It's just always very difficult to provide food services in those areas, that type of thing.
Right, but this was looking at the entire rural area, and Warm Springs stood out. I mean, there are some
Yes.
areas that are even more desolate than Warm Springs if you get to eastern Oregon, and yet Warm Springs was underperforming even those areas.
Yep, it tends to be that way. And I will tell you that it's historical in a lot of ways. One of the things that happened, of course, historically, is that when people were put on reservations, they were denied access originally to hunting,
Right.
to fishing,
Right.
to the original first foods,
Right.
which was root digging and, just gathering their, in the normal ways, even though that was treaty rights,
Mhm.
right? And now if you think about it, how much does a pound of huckleberries cost?
I don't know.
How much does a pound of fish, salmon cost these days? Unless people go and get that themselves now, which is still harder to do, it costs a lot of money to get those things these days, right? I bought a gallon of huckleberries recently. It cost me $80 for a gallon of huckleberries. And I bought it from my own tribal people, my, friends and
What do you
relatives.
do with a gallon of huckleberries?
You make jam, right? You make
Yeah.
jam.
Should have asked
Right.
you to bring some.
I haven't made it yet.
So in your mind, it's
It's very expensive because now people have realized how nutritious and how valuable those things are. So people go out and and raid those huckleberry fields now, and it's very hard for people to get those nutritious foods anymore. The tribal folks are dependent upon government commodities now, right? It's very, very difficult for people to eat well anymore, and unemployment rates are very, very high in tribal populations because there are not jobs, there's not housing. There's a lot of issues in tribal areas these days. Warm Springs is an area that struggles.
okay.
Tim, you sound like you were lukewarm on both candidates for president when you
Yeah, to various
said-
degrees,
But
yeah.
how do you land on Trump?
So when you look at the options, I see at the national level the Democrat Party being the one, this whole destroying democracy, that happening. When you've got, we'll go through these national things. You got the Biden laptop. Mark Zuckerberg came out that the government, the Biden administration, leveraged pressure on Facebook over things such as the laptop, COVID information, etc. So that's incredibly scary there.
Is it? If
Stuff like that. So when people up and say threat to democracy, that's what I'm looking at. And then even more so, people want to label Trump as this incoming dictator, you know, when I see things, again, when I started going through the Federalist Papers and just taking more time understanding Constitution, I've been doing historical Constitution podcasts and classes, and when you've got things like the Supreme Court pushing abortion to states, that's the way our government's supposed to work. When you look at the fact that 75% of the taxpayer money that the federal government takes out of Oregon comes back to Oregon, there's a whole lot there that it should never left in the first place. Which
Do you,
means
do
our,
you think
our
January
government's
6th
capable.
was a threat to democracy?
Do you know about the recent information, not to democracy? No.
Let's not
It was
get down this rabbit hole.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, I mean, especially when it just came out yesterday, I think it was yesterday, transcripts of Trump talking to the general that 3 days ahead of time, we need people here. And what was it, a couple weeks ago, the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, that camera footage of her going on that this was her responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Can I ask each of you to offer an assessment of the current governor? And what I'd like from you is criticism, and from you, what you think she's doing that's right.
Why don't you go first?
So, and it's a mixed bag. It's good that she's working to bring in technology, you know, actively, you know, going after like Intel and doing things like that. And again, the mixed bag and the frustration is the boundaries, the growth boundaries
Yeah.
being modified and adjusted to accommodate technology.
Right.
But why isn't that being done to address our affordable housing?
Well, she did.
And many more things.
She
Well, you know, we need to get going on it.
Okay. But I'm looking for things. I'm looking for nice things you have to say about the governor, because I want Connor to say not so nice things.
Sure.
Given your party affiliation.
Sure.
And you may not have any. So
Let me think here. It's a great question, and I do beat myself up over like staying out of echo chambers for sure.
well, you can think about that.
Yeah.
Connor, criticisms.
I was disappointed that there was a conversation about eBoard T6. The request for resources for T6 without
Terminal 6.
Terminal 6. And conversations about Terminal 6 resources in the governor's
I don't-
recommended budget.
What didn't you like about that?
I
I think there's some people here who don't know what you're talking about, so maybe you could, that's for our listeners. What was the request for?
The request was for Terminal 6 was scheduled to be shut down. And
At the port?
yes,
Yeah.
and we all knew
Okay.
that. Everybody knew that.
Yeah.
Right? And then the request was the governor said that there was going to be the governor's request for us to put some funds into it.
Oh, okay, but be specific why you didn't support that.
I didn't support that because I don't think it's functional to have us have a conversation about shutting it down and then all of a sudden to whip it back around and say, oh, change our mind.
Why do you think that happened?
I don't know why that happened. I don't know why that conversation happened, but it's not functional in my mind to have those types of conversations without at least, giving us a little bit of a heads up.
And the E-Board did?
Oh, I don't know. That's not my purview. I don't run that
You don't know
board.
whether the E-Board gave the money?
I didn't. That hasn't happened yet. It's next week.
Ah, you flagged that for us.
It's
But
next
you're
week.
not on the E-Board.
Well, I'm on the e-board,
Yeah.
but I don't chair that. I don't
Yeah.
chair the e-board.
And are you going to vote against it, or you're,
I'm not telling you that.
I think you just did. What else? There must be some other problems you've got with the governor.
I don't necessarily have problems with the governor. I just think, being the governor is a hard job. I would not want that job.
What do you think about her, the way she treated her wife with the position that she had?
In terms of, what do you mean treated
Well,
her?
was it wise to have her wife occupy that position? As she was unelected, she was unappointed. She was there pretty much because the governor wanted her there. Is that the way to staff your office?
I don't think she staffed anything.
Well, I mean, she was an advisor. I mean, I'm using that term loosely. I mean,
Let me just say, I have, as someone who's worked, I have talked to the governor's wife many, many times about behavioral health. The governor's wife never promised me anything, she kept her mouth shut, never like insinuated or gave me any information. Like, I would say, what do you think about this? She goes, oh, that's a great idea. And would never give me anything.
Well,
What do you
Not
make-
one time.
What do you
So-
make of all the staff departures from people who were just incredible loyalists to Kotek and then decided they couldn't abide by the situation, so they left? I mean,
I
what
don't
is one
know.
to make of that?
I don't know. I think sometimes it's time and sometimes it's frustration and sometimes turnover happens. I don't know. I mean, I know some of it was turnover, just normal transition. I think some of it could be frustration. But I can guarantee you, from my perspective, the governor's wife never told me anything. We never, even though I would rant and say things like I think this needs to happen, I think that needs to happen, the governor's wife never agreed with me about saying this or that or the other, never suggested anything, never said she'd talk to the governor about anything, not one time. And the many times that I tried to talk with her about behavioral health stuff, she never one time said anything to me that indicated in any way, shape, or form that I was going to get any kind of anything. And I feel like I have some influence in behavioral health.
If you were forced to cut the state budget, I can't think of anybody more knowledgeable than you, given the position you sit, where would you cut it?
Man, don't do that.
Ask you a tough question, I'm sorry.
Where would I cut it?
Yeah.
That would take me a minute. It really would.
So really, given your position on Joint Ways and Means, you can't think of any place where you just sort of shake your head and say, yeah, we're funding it, but I don't see the accountability, I don't see the outcomes. Why are we funding this until we get, better reporting? I'm looking at how much money they spend in other states. This is out of whack. No? No ideas for us?
I probably have a few ideas, but if I said them out loud, somebody would hurt me.
Well, here's a perfect opportunity for you to demonstrate your independence and your courage.
You know what? To be honest, given the moment we're in right now, there are too many things on the table right now that are really, really tough, and I'm not going to, because my courage is that I'm not intimidated by you or anybody.
No, I'm not asking you to be intimidated by us. I'm asking you to tell your constituents,
What I think needs to be trimmed?
share with your constituents a sense that you're not just a tax and spend Democrat, that you're actually looking out for their tax dollars, and that you're well aware that in a budget of how many billions of dollars, there are opportunities to trim and make some savings and maybe move that money and spend it elsewhere. My guess is you've got ideas and I want to hear them, but
Again, I would really need to look, to really pay attention right this very minute. I would have to look, because I don't keep those numbers in my mind right all day long. I really don't. To be honest, I don't keep those numbers in my mind all day long. And I actually think, honestly, we look at the world of inflation all the time, and I look at CSL all the time,
CSL.
and current service levels,
Okay.
because every 2 years we look at what current service level will do, and that's not just what inflation does to people's COLAs or whatever. CSL means what it's going to cost us 2 years from now, right?
Mhm.
So when we start to look at when the governor's budget comes in December, that's going to say what the governor wants, and then above and beyond that, we'll be looking at what current service level will look like in 2 years. So what we will need to pay people in 2 years from now will be different than what the budget is right this very second. So if I want the people of the state of Oregon in DHS or OHA or an ODF or wherever it is to be paid to the level where they can survive, where they can pay their mortgage, where they can buy groceries, where every agency in the state of Oregon, where those employees can live and have health insurance and make their car payments and all of that, that means all of that budget needs to be taken care of, for not just for the work that they do every day, but for their lives.
Okay.
So I have to look at all of that. And that's every single agency in the entire state. So I'm not going to give you that, what needs to be cut right this very, because it's not a simple answer. It is not a simple
All right,
answer.
let's see if Tim thinks it's a...
So this, and I really appreciate you asking these kinds of questions, because one of the things I want to point out to y'all, and this is part of why I'm here, you would not be having this discussion if there was not somebody competing against. There wouldn't be, it wouldn't be happening.
Well,
No, we'd still ask
Don't be so
the
sure.
question.
Nevertheless, okay.
I don't know if you've met Mark, but he's...
You know, the taxation, what are the limits? There's no limits here. I mean, especially Tana Sanchez, she wants to go after everything. The alcohol tax that she's looking at pursuing, the spending, the tollings. I mean, we're in a district that we got 80, I mean, we're surrounded on all three sides, and they want to push this tolling. And I went to the Capitol talking to, went to her office. She was out, you know, on the floor or whatever at the time, as well as Senator Frederick. And I mean, it's one of the things that's frustrating is you see all this waste going on. Like recently, there's a whole thing about the mobile home park being burned down, and the state bought, what was it, 26 million, I think it was, dollars worth of mobile homes to replace it, and they end up being garbage mobile homes, and then go out and spend another 12 million fixing that, and waste all over. We got the waste of the I-5 corridor, the Rose Quarter project that, you know, of course, you know, that always happens. You got these big infrastructure, and it goes from $500 million to, last I heard, we're pushing $2 billion, and Lord knows when it's actually going to get done. But there's, you know, and here it is, the person that oversees it, and there's no consideration of here's what we could cut, should we cut, can we cut? And, you know, even if there's a generic, hey, 10% across the board or whatever, we got wasted money all over. Every couple months it comes out about unaccounted. I just saw today, I think you guys wrote it actually, was it the Oregon Health Authority or something, with mental health monies that have been distributed, like they don't know where it's going and trying to crack down on where it's at. I mean, it's just, there's no accountability on this stuff. And again, like, there's the person right there. You
Do you
know?
have an assessment of the relatively new head of OHA and what kind of a job she's doing?
I feel like that poor lady walked into just a crazy pants situation, and I feel bad for her, but I really, I feel like I put her on the spot as well. Just having her walk into, she actually walked into our first task force meeting.
What's the most important thing she's done since she's been here?
Put out a bunch of fires. I don't know. You know, she's had to really.
What's the fire? I'm just,
Well, she had to walk into one of our first task force meetings, the alcohol task force, and apologize for saying something that she didn't know that was wrong, that she didn't know was wrong.
right.
Like, she had to apologize for that report going out, and she was told it was okay, and she didn't know. She
The
did
thing
not.
that we wrote about.
Yeah, the thing that you all wrote about, and she had no
But I
idea.
mean, is she bringing about structural change in OHA?
I don't have a solid enough read on it right this very second. I have not had a minute to actually sit down and have much more conversation with her. We haven't set up another meeting recently.
Are you two
so.
going door to door in your district?
I am not, because we don't feel like that's a good use of resources.
They don't need
Obviously,
to.
it's a, you know,
Okay.
Can you respond? Because you brought up our reporting. So what we were essentially reporting is that, and in the process of reporting, so you might not be fully aware of this, but basically the state asked OHA back in 2021 to do a thorough review of these contracts with the counties, right? And I was under the impression, I mean, since people have talked, under the impression that this was supposed to be done in 2023, and it doesn't appear to yet be. I mean, OHA is now saying it's happening now. So, like, I mean, are you concerned that OHA isn't moving fast enough to kind of figure out where this money is going? And, you know, as is being brought up at the alcohol task force all the time, the OHA kind of seems not 100% aware of where all this money is going. Does that concern you?
it is concerning. It's very concerning that OHA does not have, OHA is too big for its britches right this very minute. It does not have a handle on where everything is going. The new person does have a struggle on their hands of trying to get it all figured out, and it's very difficult. She's a very smart woman. She does have a lot of work to do to get these things figuring out, but it's like turning a barge. And she clearly has to wrangle a bunch of people very much like talking about like that when you're trying to get an old thing to move in a different way, it's difficult to do. It is really, really difficult to get old systems to move in a different direction. We're not a brand new, shiny thing that you can just shift. It's not a Play-Doh thing. It's old, and you have to move it. And change is hard for people. It just is.
So, Denver got a new mayor, I think it was less than a year ago. And I have friends who work in downtown Denver, and they've said that the change is incredible. Like, I have a friend who works downtown, and she's like, it's just different. I can go downtown, I can park my car, I don't have to worry about being assaulted, or I'm not stepping in, in shit, which was happening. And that mayor, I mean, he did this very quickly. He did it in the first year. He set up a system, where they bought hotels and they housed people. Why? I just don't see that we are doing that. I think that is actually an example where he did move a barge. He turned the ship pretty quickly. Why aren't we able to do that? Why are we no longer why is Oregon no longer the good
First mover.
or the innovator in, when I moved here in 1995, it was like when you read a story about urban sprawl, Oregon was the good case and Phoenix was the bad case. And now here we are, you ask people in articles about housing, Houston is the good case. Houston, Texas is getting it right, and we are getting it absolutely wrong. What has happened? I mean, have we lost our mojo?
We get in our own way a lot of the time. We really do. We get in our own way a lot of the time.
Is there an example of that you can think of that?
Yes. I think sometimes we get in our own way because it is, what is that saying about something being like the...
Perfect is the enemy of good?
Yes. We do that. The perfect being the enemy of the good. And sometimes it's very much that we want it to be perfect so much of the time that we just won't allow ourselves to make mistakes. And every time we make a mistake, we beat the crap out of the person who makes the mistake instead of just saying, okay, that was a mistake, let's pivot and make a different, and move it this way. Instead, we just eliminate that person.
Can you give us an example where someone made a mistake and they probably should have been allowed to continue, but in fact the state said, no, we're done with you? Because in fact our experience is that way too often there is no consequence for anybody who makes a mistake. So I'd love to have you disabuse us of that notion of giving us an example of a great Oregonian who lost his job when he shouldn't have because he tried to do something, because that's not our experience.
You don't think so?
I mean, I'm probably wrong. I just would love you to provide some even anecdotal evidence.
Well, I think we have some sort of, maybe some leadership levels here, depending on, maybe they're much more local than, I just think that there's some human beings who make mistakes once in a while, and they just...
And they got shoved out before they should have.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm just asking you for an example.
I'm just trying to think
of someone who should still be in office, but who got run out because he tried to do something innovative and it didn't work out, and he or she was then given the boot, because news to me.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I just feel
One
like
of the
there's so
questions I
many
want to
people
ask you
keep
is, if you're
moving.
going door to door, which you're not, is, Multnomah County now has one of the highest marginal tax rates in the country.
Portland has the highest.
The highest.
For corporations, and the second highest for
individuals.
income tax, yeah.
And you're aware of the flight of high net worth individuals out of Multnomah County, and more distressingly, you're aware that in the most recent report, we were 98th out of 100 in terms of job growth. We have Multnomah County experiencing job loss. Appears like we're swirling down the drain.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, what are you going to do about it?
Well, I'm really, really hoping that we can keep people moving, keep people getting educated. That is a huge fear of mine, is that we're not keeping people educated well enough to get them the jobs, or keep the jobs moving here. That's the scary part for me in my mind, is that we're not educating people well enough here.
But that's not the reason they're not coming here, or that's not the reason. That's part of the reason they're leaving.
It's because they can't afford to live here. I know that's the biggest fear that I have. We have flight from the district, is people can't afford to live in the district anymore because things are so expensive. Again, it's, you know, we've had the conversation about the housing situation over and over and over again. People say, well, it's not about the fact that we haven't built enough housing. It sort of is and it sort of isn't. Homelessness isn't just about not having enough housing, but that is a part of the factor. It has so many layers to it.
Again, we're still one of the cheapest housing markets on the West Coast, but we also have the highest marginal income tax rates.
Yes.
So the question is, are taxes too high, and is that part of the reason why we're seeing job losses and a reduction in population? Yes?
I think so. I think so. I think our taxes are crazy. I think people want to see a balance in our taxes. They want to see that shaked out differently. When I'm doing door knocking for other folks, right, because I'm doing, there's kind of no point in door knocking in my district.
Right.
Because, for one, obviously.
90%.
Yeah, 90%, and it's kind of it's a waste of resources.
I gotcha.
You know, but if I'm door knocking for someone else, more often than not, when people talk about taxes, they're talking about the fact that their taxes are different than the person down the street's taxes, and that they're paying twice what the person down the street's paying, and it makes no sense to them.
Which tax are they paying this?
Their
twice?
property taxes. That
Oh.
their property taxes are different down the street with what they believe is a comparable house. Right? They believe that the home is comparable in terms of size or costs or whatever, but it's the year it was built, the year it was bought, or whatever it is, that those property taxes should be comparable. And it's not about how much they pay or how much somebody else pays, it's the fairness of it. That's what they see as the issue.
We hear a lot about the pre-K for all tax being the big one for higher income families and people.
Right.
What do you, I mean, I know this isn't, it's a county tax, but I mean, should we not have this? Or should it be statewide or?
I mean, it'd be nice if it were statewide. I mean, because education is such a huge issue. I mean, kids need education.
Yeah. How do you feel about pre-K for all?
When it comes, we don't see our money being spent well across the board to include that. I mean, that's one of the big frustrations here is the money. I mean, that's partly, we got all these different levels they're laying their taxes on, and we don't see responsible spending.
Or results?
The results, I mean, right, I mean, across, yeah, I mean, that's all part of it. And I mean, she's talking about the taxation, when's enough? And as she's saying tax, when we're talking about taxes being too high, we're looking at the sin tax situation with the alcohol being, gone after.
Well, alcohol taxes haven't risen since what?
No, but she's pushing, I mean,
1977.
I think said 73.
sure, but I mean, is it just for the sake of doing it? It's not a lack, the state doesn't have a lack of money. It's at the moment, it's got
She's doing it to alter people's behavior.
Sure, is that the role of government, to alter people's behavior on stuff like that?
I think there ought to be a law requiring that people wear motorcycle helmets when they ride a motorcycle?
I'm very libertarian on stuff.
Okay, so you've got your opinion.
I mean,
And now then I keep mine on because I'm smart. I mean, that's the smart thing to do.
Law.
What's that? So, there's a quote that I really like that I came across is at the national level, I'm a libertarian. At the state, a Republican. City and county Democrat, and friends and family, a socialist. So it's one of these things that there's gradations, and in the scheme of it, locally, there's things that what's worth fighting over.
So if somebody goes out and drinks it and drinks like crazy and gets cirrhosis of the liver, and they call themselves a libertarian, should they not get Medicaid to care for their disease? I mean, I think that's what these efforts
Sure,
are.
but then you get into what's
Right.
but when you go into that,
Should you
then
just say, I'm not gonna collect
where's
any
limiting
assistance?
principles? Where are the limits on stuff like that when it comes to things? But again, we're looking at the main issue here that the state has we have a really bad record of responsible spending, and so get things lined up that you can competently do this, and then people are more open and reasonable about, okay, we're going to get this tax. We know, we're looking at and the reason for the alcohol that's being put out there is mental health. type addiction and that type of thing that's associated with it. Fine. Yeah, but what's Oregon's record when it comes to mental health and addiction? So we're going to take more money. We're bad at doing this as it is, and take more money to put into whatever systems when we already know we're not competent.
So
Core capabilities. Get your core capabilities dialed in, and that's a big frustration with all of this. Is we've got. I mean, you guys like this is amazing because we see eye to eye on what's going on, and accountability and results. And how do you get your arms around this? And that's like, for me, that's like the number one thing in all of this.
with respect to the alcohol tax, the Democratic legislature has really been unable to move the dime on this for 20 or 30 years. We have among the lowest alcohol taxes in America. It feels like I've got a running theme today. Does the beer and alcohol industry own the Democratic Party?
No.
Why hasn't there been any movement? What else do you look at to explain why why what you want is very difficult to happen in the state? What are the forces at work here?
Well, one thing, there's priorities sometimes too, and taxes are really, really hard to do, and it's a
You
3/5
had no
vote.
problem getting a cell phone tax passed.
Yes, I know. I'm working on it. I've been working on it.
No, but
Yes.
but
And, well,
It's
let me
easy
just
to
say
get money.
Sometimes there's tactics. Sometimes there's tactics, and sometimes there's priorities, right? And it was very, very difficult for me to get that cell phone tax to happen. And I'm working on this one, and I think I have an avenue this time. And part of it was getting the task force to move, right? To make that happen, to get those people to the table. And of course, part of it was ignoring Lucas for the longest time. So that we could get to that place of having these conversations.
do you
And
think the beer and wine industry has undue influence on the Democratic Party?
I don't know that I think that necessarily. They might. They have a lot of influence. They have a lot of money, right? But here's the thing. At this point in time, I think I have an avenue. And I will tell you I'll tell you what my plan is, Lucas.
I'm shocked. I'm waiting to ask.
So, and I've told the industry this. They're very clear. They're very, very clear. I've made it very clear to them from the very beginning. They have not increased their taxes. Their base privilege tax has not been increased in almost 50 years, since 1977. They jumped up and down and said, but the wine tax was increased in 1983. It was increased by 2 cents so that they could have the wine board, right? It was increased by 2 cents. So it's 8 cents on the gallon for beer and 67 cents, I believe, is 67 or 68 cents for wine. I'm proposing a point of sale tax, and I don't have a number yet, but my proposal is that for those taxes to be used for prevention, intervention, and recovery services for anyone under the age of 21. Because we do not have resources specifically dedicated for those services.
Are you getting any money from the beer and wine lobby?
I'm not getting money from anybody.
Wait,
I don't even have to file because I just haven't even done enough money to file.
Okay.
So you don't want to say no.
I don't have a number yet.
And so how are you going to come up with that number?
I'm working on it. I am working on it. But it will be indexed to
And
inflation.
do you think you will have industry support for when you come up with that
Not
number?
likely. Come on. They don't want any taxes. They don't. I mean, but let me just say, a point of sale tax is probably better for them than the overall base privilege tax, right? They're less likely to be cranky about it. They want me to let go of the privilege tax altogether, but I'm like, whatever, dudes. But that's my proposal at the moment. Now that could shift and change a little bit. It just depends. The reason why we didn't have them come to a vote at the end, obviously, is because we weren't going to come to consensus. We made that very clear, right? It wasn't going to happen.
I guess so you think that without that consensus, you're still going to be able to convince enough legislators to come to you?
Yeah, that's very clear. I don't think we were ever going to be able to come to consensus. Come on now.
I don't think anyone thought you were going to come to consensus. I think they thought you were going to have a vote so you get a clear recommendation.
I didn't think that was going to happen.
Is there going to be, we have to wrap this up, I know, is there going to be an effort to rewrite the laws around civil commitment in the next session?
Don't know that.
You
I
don't know that?
I don't know that for
Have you
sure.
heard that, or is this the first you've heard of this?
No, that's not the first I've heard of it. But
So there's talk.
that
you
would
just-
be one of those things that we should talk about, the perfect and the good sort of situation. Yeah.
Do you look like you wanted to say something about civil commitment?
Oh, I mean, that's just one that I've had some interesting discussions with people. One lady, I knocked on her door, specifically, brought that up. Was it back in, I was very young at that point, was it the 80s or whatever, when it all got blown apart? And we see it on the streets now. And certainly, like, it's got to be done, it needs to happen. End of story. Like, there's got to...
What needs to happen?
The civil commitment, people are, the hospitalization, however you want to, look at it. And for me, it was always growing up with that horrendous image of the, horror asylums and so on. But we just got to take that, like, that's really got to happen in one form or another. Because I actually went out, a couple days ago, Chinatown, and meet a young girl that's getting serially raped. There it is.
So this is just academic, but how does civil commitment square with libertarianism?
People are not of sound mind.
So the state can
there's
do
when you
what-
can't
what
when
they
you're
will.
when you're at a mental capacity that you really can't consent over your own body, what's going on? And that's what we're talking here. Like, there's merit to that, and it's a public endangerment, public safety, the
Someone
danger
has to
to
make that call.
How does
Sure.
libertarianism square with pro-choice? I mean, pro-life.
pro-life.
Yeah. Is that not
There,
government overreach?
we're getting to the
All right, we don't have to get into it.
and that kind of
Just
stuff.
curious.
And honestly, I'd love to meet people and have these big academic discussions like that. I love bantering this stuff around and figuring it out and so on.
All right, we are about
for
out
sure.
of time. We have a silly
Yeah.
question. Can you tell us how much, it sounds like you've raised no money.
Yeah.
Okay, how much have you raised?
Goodness. Well, I raise money for everybody else, right?
No, I want to know how much for your campaign.
Oh, I didn't raise any money for my campaign.
You have no money in your campaign?
Oh, no,
She's a
I
lot.
do. I probably, right now, I think I have about $3,000. But I raise money and put it into Future PAC for
Right. Who
Democrats.
is your biggest donor to date?
Who is my biggest
Or
donor?
your two biggest donors, if you can't figure out who's number one?
I honestly don't pay that much attention. I'll be really frank, honestly don't pay that much attention. I could look.
We can look.
We can look.
Sorry.
You can look. I
Okay,
don't know.
so
Honestly,
are
I
we ready
don't.
for-
Fun
Yeah.
question. Let's do fun question.
Fun question. Who were you in high school? Like, what was your
What were you known for? in high
role,
school?
or what were you voted most likely to
Or did you have an extracurricular activity that you stood out and were known as, you were captain of the football team, or president of the debate society, or you were the person they bought drugs from in the bathroom? What were you known for? Statute of limitations is long past, so anything goes.
Lucky for you.
I did not go to high school. I went to an alternative high school and did not graduate from high school. I tested into college and no one asked me if I had a high school diploma, and I did not tell them. And
Wow.
I have a master's degree and I have an honorary doctorate and whatever.
But what were you known for in high school? In this alternative high school?
Probably for being a political maniac, for being the person who would be the protester.
So you were a protester in high school?
Mhm.
Anything in particular you were protesting?
Anti-nuclear.
So what decade are we talking?
The 70s.
So I'm just curious,
Late
which
70s.
nuclear power plant were you protesting? Just in general, or was it in Oregon?
Yeah,
So you were protesting Hanford?
Hanford, yeah.
You were
No,
marching with Lloyd Marbett?
I don't remember that
No, he
name
was the big
specifically,
opponent.
but I remember very specifically as a little kid, because I lived in Tillamook at one point when I was a little kid, but I remember actually them taking us to Hanford, and I remember seeing the pond
Mhm.
and the dead ducks
So
outside of Hanford. I think-
anti-nuclear protester
Yes.
in high school,
Yes,
okay?
yeah.
Hmm.
Tim, you were a drug dealer.
No, far. Far.
I
from
want
it.
someone to answer.
No, yeah.
No one's gonna be honest about that.
Yeah, I was the dorky kid with the mullet, living in a trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting in the classroom with the preppy kids from the country club.
And what high school was this?
So people laugh, but Fort Collins, we had Poudre High School, P-O-U-D-R-E.
Fort Collins,
yeah.
but that's a military town.
No.
It's a CSB.
It's a
Oh, no, I'm
beer
thinking
town.
of Fort Carson.
It's actually very parallel. I see it as like a 1/10 scale version of Portland. It's kind of like Eugene.
Yeah.
So
Really very left.
Well,
Fort Collins is.
has it got-
It's gotten
I'm
way
older.
more. Yeah, it's gotten
it
way
was
more.
never-
It's
is it like a Boulder level?
not quite. Again,
Yeah.
it's I compare Boulder to Bend. I compare
Yeah,
Fort Collins to Eugene.
So you were the kid with a mullet.
Trailer trash kid with a mullet. Like I said,
in Fort Collins.
yeah.
What year did you graduate from high school?
91.
I'm from Colorado too.
Oh, what part?
Summit County.
Okay.
Grew up. Yeah. It was a-
Yeah.
You also had a mullet in high school.
Well, it was worse.
Do you
Yeah.
had a mullet?
No, I didn't have a mullet. My hair was parted in the middle though and feathered. But this was. I'm 59 years old, so.
Yeah, I was the kid with the mullet. I'd be in the classes with the preppy kids, like the advanced math and different things, and just didn't quite
Yeah.
fit in on that level, and latchkey type situation, etc. But did get involved in like high school drama, and that was a fun thing. And actually did photo and video
Wow.
in junior high and high school.
Did we get your photos at the top?
Yeah, mine
we
got
did.
got.
Okay, mine
Okay.
got. Okay.
We're out of time. Really,
Great.
thank you for coming in for a spirited conversation.
Yeah. No, this is
Thank
good.
you.
Well, like I said, for me, like the conversation was amazing. Even last time, the conversation was amazing.
We will
And-
not say you're all about tents
Yeah.
and home.
Right. I mean, and that was a frustrating piece. The real things we got going on, and it just seemed pretty dismissive. Especially when I hear what you guys are saying. Like, I feel like we're eye to eye on this. I might disagree with other things, but these are the frustrations that I see in the people I talk to.
What's that?
I didn't know what
Yeah.
Exactly what you guys are saying.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Are you
Great to
saying,
see you.
because I'm
Do
trying
you ever
to figure out
drive
how
up
to
from
write
Fort
this.
Collins?
So